Mark Mullet, welcome back to Undivided.
Hey, glad to be back.
Yeah, so talk about how you've spent your summer, trying to make the pitch to voters ahead of the primary.
Well, I think the main focus from our side is I think the only way you can beat Bob Ferguson is to have a candidate who is fiscally conservative and socially liberal. I think that's how you kind of get a coalition to beat Bob. And we've been going around the state making that argument to every group that'll have us speak. And I do find it resonates with people. And we're just going to keep spreading that message as much as possible up until August 6th.
Yeah, and you and I have had conversations about this offline as well. And invariably, when I'm at events where there's a lot of Republicans, there's a faction that is supporting Dave, and then there's a faction that comes up to me and says, "Brandi, why aren't you supporting Mark Mullet? He's the only one who can beat Bob Ferguson." And I get like a tongue lashing from Republicans about it. So I understand the point that you have made about that, about how. If you make it past the primary, there's no doubt in my mind you'd beat Bob Ferguson. If Dave Reichert makes it past, it's going to be a very, very challenging thing to do. So when you are making that pitch to Republican voters, who I would argue more of our viewers are Republicans than Democrats, what is the pitch that you make to them about why you're the better candidate to move past the August primary?
I think and you've obviously dealt with me during my time in the state Senate. When I say I'm fiscally conservative and socially liberal, I'm not gaslighting on those issues. I mean, my track record 100% lines up with that. I think we've had disagreements on some of the social issues like 5599. And so I'm proud of being socially liberal, but I'm also proud of being fiscally conservative. And I think when we actually get in front of rooms and people hear that message, it definitely resonates, whether you're in Eastern Washington or Western Washington. Our ultimate challenge is how many rooms can you get in front of to share that message? And this is our whole focus of the campaign, is continue trying to get that word out as much as possible, because our state needs to shift in a better direction. I think you can have a fiscally conservative governor in the state of Washington. I firmly believe that is a possibility. I do not think Washington voters will elect a socially conservative governor. And so I think my message to independents, moderate Republicans, you're going to have to decide at some point, are you willing to cross party lines and actually vote for a moderate Democrat? Or are you just going to vote for the letter? If you're going to vote for the letter, I think we're going to have far left governors for all of time in the state of Washington, because I lead kind of we call them reasonable and pragmatic Democrats in Olympia, where I feed them lunch every couple of weeks. I mean, Brandi, I feed every reasonable and moderate Democrat with like 2 large pizzas. It's like we're outnumbered, right? Yeah. It's not, there's 80, 70 elected Democrats. There's 8 or 10 people that I think really dive in and are willing to buck the party on difficult issues. So the top of the ticket on the Democratic side is never going to be the moderate. It's always going to be the one who's as far left. And so the only way you can ever defeat that, I think, is to have this bipartisan coalition.
Yeah.
But that has to happen in the primary, because if it doesn't happen in the primary, there's no chance for it to happen.
Well, let me tell you, when you say, reasonable Democrat, who's been acting like a very reasonable Democrat lately?
Who's that?
Bob Ferguson. All of a sudden, Bob
millions of dollars
Ferguson
to rewrite history.
Yeah, all of a sudden, Bob Ferguson is a very moderate Democrat. I'm interested in your take on some of his ads. He put out this ad about public safety and fentanyl, and before that, talking about he's going to push back against the status quo. I have my opinion. Obviously, I'm biased, but as a actual moderate Democrat, how have those ads struck you?
Just offensive. I mean, I think you've said it on the show. It's gaslighting. That's what he's doing. He's spending millions of dollars to rewrite history. And if you go back to his original launch video, his original launch video is he was trying to make sure he wasn't going to get outflanked from the left. And now it comes down to the bare end. And now he's just spending millions of dollars to basically say, look at me, like I support law enforcement, yet I won't even actually sit down and answer questions from the Washington Association of Sheriffs and Police Chiefs. He literally was the only of the 4 candidates who literally just refused, as the top cop in our state, to even sit down for an interview where you knew the questions in advance. There was no gotcha questions. And the fact that he actually spent the time and money to record an ad rather than just meet with actual police and hear what their concerns were speaks volumes about his character.
Yeah. Speaking of character, because that's, what we've seen, it's obvious to me, it's obvious to you, this rewriting of history. I will say, I was shocked and saddened, and I don't get sad often in politics, that the Seattle Times didn't endorse you. I had even told you at some point, I was like, oh, they'll endorse you. That's not even a question in my mind. I thought they'll never endorse Bob Ferguson, all the transparency issues that he's had, public safety, wants to legalize hard drugs. Were you as surprised as I was, or not so much?
That was a rough day. I'll be honest. That was a rough day. And so there was a recent op-ed written in to kind of, I think, criticize the Times for their endorsement of Bob. And I thought that did a good job of articulating the differences between Ferguson and myself. But I will admit it was tough. And I feel like I'm fighting a battle because I say when you are socially liberal and fiscally conservative, you don't naturally fit into either home. It's like you come out and say, I support gay marriage and women's reproductive rights. And I also hate the long-term care payroll tax. And so just on those three issues, you've managed to upset people on both sides of the political spectrum. And that's the ultimate challenge for me in this entire race is I just don't fit cleanly into that box of, all Democrat or all Republican. Like I'm really proud of the Democrats on these social values, but it doesn't change the reality that I've been the most vocal against the long-term care payroll tax since the bill was introduced in 2019. And I'm not going to back away from that. And so I am going to always be transparent and honest of where I am. And like I said, we have a couple of weeks of people filling out ballots and that's it, right? So our hope is, I just wanted voters to have the choice to actually vote for somebody because I have been sympathetic. I think Republicans say, I feel like my vote in Washington doesn't count. And when I hear that and I see Republicans who I'm friends with relocating to other parts of the country, that for me was actually a real reason for wanting to run is I wanted, if you're a moderate or independent, I wanted you to have somebody on the ballot in the primary you could actually vote for and say, hey, here's someone who lines up with me who also probably feels similar to I do. They don't neatly fit into either political party. And that is the option we're giving voters in this primary. And we'll see how it goes. And if it goes poorly, I think my fear is that it's going to be hard to find future Mark Mullets who are willing to buck their own party and really go down this middle lane. Because if voters are only going to vote based on the letter in the primary, that makes it really hard.
Yeah, I told you all along you should have run as an independent. I would love to see an I next to your name. I think it's more fitting of what you are. And I'm curious, have you? Let's just be honest. I mean, the polling for you has been single digits, right? We can be frank about that. And so I think we can look at the primary clear-eyed. I would rather have you in government in some form. I mean, people who watch this show will know that you have almost single-handedly been responsible for killing some bad bills and resuscitating some necessary ones like police pursuits. So, given the fact that you've pushed pretty hard against Democrats, you've done some things they haven't liked, like exposing the fact that they sold an endorsement to Bob Ferguson for $1 million. Are you persona non grata with Democrats if you lose this election? Is that the end of your political career?
I don't think that's the case. I mean, I think that I will admit I love public service. I'm not obviously a very partisan politician. I just have never gotten any joy out of just yelling and screaming at the other side of the aisle. And there's nothing that could ever happen that would change that. So I'd rather not be in politics. If the only way you can be in politics is to yell and scream the other side of the aisle, it's just not of interest to me. But I will, we'll see how everything goes and we'll see what the voters say. But, at this point in time, yes, people have their ballots, right? And they've got time to influence it. And I think I completely understand what you're saying. The polls are the polls, but the only poll that in the end of the day matters is how people actually vote when they fill in their bubble. And most people obviously have not voted yet. And so this is why I'm always willing to go on your show. Like I said, I like the fact that even when we disagree, it's done in a way that I think is very professional and respectful. And I know you and I haven't agreed on some of these social issues, but you've never done it in a way that's made me be like, oh, I'm not going to go back on her show again. It's like, it's always done in a way that seems, like I say, professional, which I appreciate.
You're not a coward because when we disagree, like 5599, you were in studio sitting next to me explaining why you voted for it. And so I appreciate people who aren't cowardly in their positions and are willing to come and defend them. By the way, if I haven't mentioned it before, the mullet time signs are my favorite political signs of the cycle. There's a couple outside where I go work out in Issaquah, and I love them. So brilliant. But Mark Mullet, make your final pitch to voters who are on the fence.
My final pitch is our state needs to change in a more reasonable direction. That change is not going to happen through somebody who is conservative on the social issues, because the Washington voters in November are not going to go for that. So we're down to the final hours here, right? Where if people want to see change in our state, they're going to have to really look at what's the candidate that has the ability to have a bipartisan broad coalition of business and labor groups supporting them, public safety groups supporting them, who can actually take on Bob Ferguson and isn't going to be susceptible to these attacks like we've seen around women's reproductive rights and other things, where they can't attack me. They can attack the Republican candidates, but they can't attack me on those issues. And I think that's our best path going forward to actually have change in the state of Washington. And I've done everything I can. I will have no regrets no matter how things turn out on August 6th. I will have no regrets. And I guess I've absolutely loved my time in public service, and it's been really enjoying and satisfying. And I have I'm definitely not second guessing anything that's happened so far.
All right, Mark. Well, we'll be watching. Good luck in the August primary, and we'll talk to you soon.
Hey, thanks for having me on. Take care.